Most people don't run out of money because they earn too little. They run out of money because their lifestyle quietly becomes expensive to maintain. And what makes this dangerous is that it rarely feels dramatic in the moment. It feels normal. Today, we're going to walk through 10 minimalist money rules that consistently separate people who always seem financially stable from people who feel stretched even on a solid income. Minimalism, in the financial sense, is not about deprivation. It's about reducing the ongoing cost of maintaining your life. Two households can earn the same salary, live in the same city, and pay similar rent, yet end up in completely different financial positions. The difference is usually not income, it's lifestyle maintenance load. Let's start with the first rule. Rule 1. Define your enough number. Financial instability often begins when your definition of enough keeps moving. If your spending expands every time your income rises, stability becomes mathematically difficult. Minimalists solve this early. They define what enough looks like. Imagine you receive a $6,000 raise this year. Without a clear boundary, that money often disappears into slightly nicer upgrades, a better phone, more frequent takeout, a higher car payment. Individually, each feels harmless. Collectively, they reset your baseline. Researchers at the Harvard University have documented the concept of the hedonic treadmill, the tendency for people to quickly adapt to higher consumption levels. In one widely cited behavioral study, participants returned close to their baseline happiness within months after income increases. In plain terms, your expenses can permanently rise even when the satisfaction does not. Defining enough creates resistance against automatic lifestyle creep. It turns spending into a decision, not a reflex. Minimalists who do this early often find that financial stability becomes much easier to maintain. Rule 2. Use cost per use thinking. Minimalists rarely look only at price. They look at cost per use. This single shift dramatically changes buying behavior. On a whiteboard, the math is simple. A $200 jacket worn 200 times costs 200 divided by 200 equals $1 per wear. A $60 jacket worn 10 times costs 60 divided by 10 equals $6 per wear. The cheaper item was actually more expensive. You see this frequently with subscription clutter. Someone keeps 3 streaming services, 2 premium apps, a cloud storage plan they barely touch. Each charge feels small, but the cost per actual use is extremely high. Minimalists don't just ask, "Can I afford this?" They ask, "Will I use this enough to justify owning it?" That question alone prevents a surprising amount of financial leakage. Rule 3. The replacement test. Before buying something new, minimalists often apply a simple filter. What will this replace? If the answer is nothing, the purchase deserves extra scrutiny. You're considering another pair of shoes. Ask one question: which pair leaves the closet? If none does, your inventory and your maintenance costs just increased. Research from University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, on household clutter found that higher levels of accumulated possessions were associated with elevated stress markers in homeowners. In one home study sample, cortisol patterns were measurably higher in more cluttered environments. The financial cost and the cognitive load often rise together. More items mean more storage, more maintenance, more decisions, more replacement cycles. Minimalists actively cap this growth. Rule 4. Build spending friction on purpose. There's a subtle pattern you can observe in many modern spending environments. The easier a purchase becomes, the more frequently it happens without deliberate thought. Consider a common late evening scenario. You're on your phone, slightly tired, casually browsing. A product appears, reasonably priced, well-reviewed, one click away. Because your payment details are already stored, the entire decision window compresses to just a few seconds. In that moment, nothing feels reckless. But what minimalists understand is that speed removes reflection, and reflection is often what protects long-term financial stability. Behaviorally, the human brain is highly sensitive to what researchers call decision friction. When even a small pause is introduced, re-entering a card number, switching devices, or waiting 24 hours, the emotional intensity behind many purchases fades noticeably. The desire often wasn't permanent, it was situational. For example, one household might keep every shopping app fully optimized for instant checkout. Another intentionally removes saved payment methods and requires a manual entry step. Over a single year, both households may believe they have similar discipline. Yet the second household typically experiences fewer impulse transactions, simply because the environment forces a moment of reconsideration. That small structural difference compounds quietly. The key idea here is simple but powerful. Minimalists don't rely on willpower alone. They design their environment so good financial behavior becomes the path of least resistance. When saving is automatic and spending requires a pause, stability becomes much easier to maintain without constant mental effort. Rule 5. Calculate the real cost of ownership. Purchase price is only the beginning. Minimalists look at the full ownership footprint. Consider a car upgrade. The sticker price might rise by $8,000, but the real annual difference often includes higher insurance, more expensive tires, increased fuel costs, higher registration fees. Over 5 years, the gap can exceed $15,000 to $20,000. On the whiteboard, monthly difference, insurance plus $40, fuel plus $60, maintenance plus $35, total extra per month $135. Over 60 months, $135 times 60 equals $8,100, and that's before depreciation. Minimalists rarely evaluate purchases in isolation. They evaluate the lifetime drag on their cash flow. Rule 6. Cap your fixed expenses early. Fixed expenses deserve special attention because they behave differently from most other spending categories. Variable expenses, like dining out or occasional shopping, naturally fluctuate, but fixed costs tend to lock themselves into your monthly baseline and remain there, often for years. This is why minimalists treat early fixed cost decisions with unusual care. Imagine two people early in their careers. Both receive their first meaningful salary increase within the same year. One decides to upgrade apartments immediately, moving from $1,400 per month to $2,100. The new place feels justified. Nicer finishes, better location, more space. The monthly difference, about $700, seems manageable in isolation. The other keeps housing stable and directs the extra income towards savings and investments. Fast forward 3 years, if an unexpected expense appears, medical costs, job instability, family obligations, the first person must now work around a much heavier fixed structure. The second person retains far more flexibility because their baseline remained intentionally lean. Psychologically, this happens because humans adapt quickly to improved living conditions, but become resistant to reversing them. Behavioral economics sometimes refer to this as downward lifestyle rigidity. Once a higher fixed standard is established, reducing it feels disproportionately uncomfortable, even when financially rational. A helpful way to think about this is fixed expenses are not just monthly numbers, they are future commitments your present self is signing on behalf of your future self. Minimalists slow down at this stage. They ask whether today's comfort upgrade is worth the long-term reduction in flexibility. That extra moment of evaluation often prevents years of unnecessary financial pressure. Rule 7. Use the 72-hour rule for non-essentials. Impulse purchases are rarely urgent. Minimalists delay them. A simple version is the 72-hour rule. You see a $280 gadget online. Day 1, it feels essential. Day 3, the emotional intensity usually drops. In many cases, the purchase quietly disappears from your priority list. The brain's reward system responds strongly to novelty, but that spike fades quickly. Minimalists intentionally wait for the emotional perv to cool before committing money. Rule 8. Audit recurring charges quarterly. Small recurring charges are one of the most persistent financial leaks. Minimalists review them on a schedule. In the U.S., it's common for households to carry $200 to $300 per month in underused subscriptions, often unnoticed, often auto-renewing, often years old. A simple quarterly audit. Step 1. Download your last 3 bank statements. Step 2. Highlight every recurring charge. Step 3. Ask one question. Would I sign up for this again today? If not, it's a candidate for removal. Rule 9. Separate lifestyle from identity. Identity spending is rarely obvious while it's happening. Most people don't consciously think, I'm buying this to signal status. The decision usually feels more subtle, like upgrading to something that simply feels more appropriate for where you are in life. For instance, imagine someone who receives a promotion at work. Within a few months, their wardrobe becomes slightly more premium, their car upgrade starts to feel more justified, and their dining choices gradually shift upward. None of these moves individually appear extreme, but collectively they begin to reshape the person's financial baseline. What's happening underneath is a well-documented psychological dynamic. Humans naturally align their external environment with their perceived social identity. Researchers in consumer psychology often describe this as self-signaling behavior, purchases that reinforce the story we tell ourselves about who we are. The risk is not the occasional upgrade. The risk is when financial decisions become emotionally anchored to identity maintenance, because once spending supports identity, cutting back no longer feels like a neutral financial adjustment. It starts to feel like a personal downgrade. Minimalists create a protective separation here. They intentionally define success using internal financial metrics, savings rate, investment growth, optionality, rather than visible consumption signals. A useful clarity sentence to remember: the more your identity depends on what you maintain, the harder financial flexibility becomes. By keeping lifestyle and identity loosely connected, minimalists preserve the ability to adjust spending when circumstances change, without the psychological friction that traps many otherwise high earners. Rule 10. Protect the gap. Protecting the gap is where minimalist strategy turns into long-term financial momentum. The gap, the difference between income and spending, is not just extra money sitting idle. It is the primary engine that funds emergency reserves, investment growth, and future optionality. To see how quietly this matters, consider a realistic progression. You begin your career and manage to maintain a $300 monthly surplus. It doesn't feel dramatic. Over time, your income rises, but you consciously prevent lifestyle from absorbing the full increase. Gradually, the gap expands to $500 per month. At that point, something important happens. The gap starts to compound not only financially, but psychologically. With even a modest investment return, you begin to notice that your money is working in the background. Financial decisions feel less reactive and more deliberate. Behaviorally, this creates what some financial planners describe as stability momentum. When people see visible progress in their investment accounts, they become more motivated to preserve the behaviors that created it in the first place. In contrast, households that allow lifestyle creep to fully consume income increases often experience the opposite effect. Even with rising salaries, the feeling of financial tightness persists because the gap never meaningfully widens. One additional clarity point is worth slowing down for. Protecting the gap does not require extreme frugality. It requires consistency in preventing silent expense expansion. Minimalists focus less on occasional large savings wins and more on guarding the monthly margin that quietly builds long-term resilience. Over decades, this steady protection of the gap is what transforms ordinary incomes into durable financial stability.
If there is one idea to carry forward, it is this: financial stability rarely comes from one big decision. It comes from small structural choices repeated consistently over time. Make those choices a little more intentional, and your money often starts behaving very differently. And if this changed how you see your money, subscribe for smarter financial thinking. Your future self will thank you.